Welcome back to the channel HEX Tribe. In this video, I'm going to talk about why the origin address might not be exactly what you think it is, and I'm going to give you 6 reasons that reveal the real true intentions of the HEX origin address. Now, for people that don't know, this is an address in the HEX ecosystem that owns about 90% of the entire supply of the coins, and a lot of people have really knee-jerk reactions to this, either good or bad, which ends up making the coin seem very controversial, which has actually been good for marketing. But I'm going to explain from my perspective why, with real provable facts, on-chain metrics, the HEX origin address is not actually as nefarious as one might think in the first couple of seconds after hearing that a single entity owns that much supply in a single coin. And stick with me till the end, because reason number 6 is the number one most undeniable reason that would convince pretty much any hater that has the ears to listen and the eyes to see. And it's really undeniable on-chain evidence that the origin address is beneficial for the HEX ecosystem. But let's get right into it and not waste any time here. Reason number 1 is that Richard Hart, the founder of HEX, who most people assume to be the origin address, has very blatantly said in public live streams, hours and hours of content on YouTube, and if you've listened to any of his content, you would know this, that he's not in crypto for the money anymore. He's a retired multimillionaire, and he was at the age of 25 off of internet businesses. He sold a $60 million a year business at the age of 25 and retired. Not to mention, he mined full Bitcoin blocks at 50 BTC per block on his own CPU in 2011. So not only is the guy a rich retired tech entrepreneur, but he's also a rich Bitcoin entrepreneur, probably a Bitcoin multimillionaire, dare I say billionaire, from 2011. So he's been in crypto almost as long as the whole industry has been around. He doesn't need your money. And that's what I think a lot of people have a hard time getting through. He says this verbatim in not so many words if you actually listen to him talk. So my question for you is, have you actually listened to Richard talk? Have you actually listened to his live streams where he admits that he's in this for the glory? He's in this for significance. Because at this point, once you have all the money and all the stuff one could buy, what do you do with your life? You chase significance, you chase power, you chase respect, and influencing the world, right? So he actually, believe it or not, wants to make other people rich, and you might actually know that if you've watched any of his content. Now, the question to you is, have you? Or have you simply listened to maybe some clips taken out of context from some random haters on the internet, or just heard through the game of telephone on Twitter, random accusations from people with no name and no followers and no face in their profile picture? Twitter's a dangerous place out there where literally anybody can just say whatever they want. And more surprisingly, people just believe them, right? It's truly the blind leading the blind out there. So my challenge to you is that if you've heard anything about the HEX origin address being nefarious, where'd you hear it from? And have you bothered listening to the founder himself explain the intentions, assuming he is the origin address, explaining the intentions of the HEX ecosystem and why he does what he does and what motivates him? You might want to give it a try. And if not, that's fine. I'm not here to convince you to buy HEX or anything like that. If you don't want to believe it, if you don't want to give it a try, if you don't want to listen to the man himself, hey, I can only lead a horse to water, but I can't make him drink. Reason number 2, at the very beginning of HEX, and this is verifiable on a public blockchain, the Ethereum blockchain, the origin address, who has since sent a lot of the HEX original coins to what's called daughter addresses, many daughter addresses, made a couple of very long-term, 3, 5, 10-year, what's called signaling stakes. And I call them signaling stakes because the origin address did this at the very beginning of HEX to, in my opinion, signal good faith in the project. I mean, why would anybody make a 10-year stake in their own project unless they actually believed in it? A project that he spent 2 years developing, mind you. And now I'm going under the assumption that Richard is the origin address. This is actually not proven. There's really no way to prove it, unfortunately. But let's just talk about the OA, or origin address, in third person. The OA made signaling stakes early on in the lifespan of HEX, which signaled good faith and signaled that, hey, I'm going to be here for 5, 10, even 15 years. And you can see these signaling stakes early on. Now, the vast majority of the HEX supply, the OA left liquid and unstaked, and that is to help the APY be higher for everybody else in the ecosystem and to not diminish those APY rewards. But he did make some early stakes to say, hey guys, I'm going to be here for the long haul. Reason number 3, early on in the adoption amplifier of HEX, the launch phase of HEX, for people that don't know, it was 365 days long. It was a full year long. And every day there was a bucket of HEX that you could trade your Ethereum for and get HEX back in return. So it was a fair launch phase where you had a full year to get in or to decide whether or not you wanted to get into HEX. And it's one of the more fair launch phases that I've ever seen in any cryptocurrency, frankly. But what happened early on is that At the very beginning, in the first couple of months, HEX wasn't traded on any exchanges, or maybe it was traded on one very tiny exchange. But then, HEX began trading on Uniswap. See, HEX launched right while Uniswap was getting popular. And Uniswap was getting so popular, and HEX was actually the primary thing traded on Uniswap for many months. So around 4 months into the adoption amplifier, which is just another word for the launch phase, remember, people started trying to game the system. What does this mean? They would buy up a bunch of HEX for that particular day in the adoption amplifier, and then they would go over to Uniswap, and then they would dump it, and they would dump the price down, not allowing the price to grow during that launch phase. Now, this could have happened, and it would have strongly diminished the price of HEX for that year, but the origin address stepped in and actually added Ethereum to the daily adoption amplifier buckets in order to make the ratio such that arbitraging the price from the adoption amplifier to Uniswap was no longer feasible. Now, some people got mad about this, but the people that got upset about this were the people trying to actively hurt the price, thinking that they found a way to game the system. And of course, they were denied that opportunity, but everybody else, the people that wanted the price to go up, everybody else was very happy about that. And the people trying to game the system, funnily enough, tried to make their own coin, their own copycat of HEX, which failed miserably, but we won't talk about that. So the origin address saved the price of HEX during the adoption amplifier by adding ETH to the adoption amplifier daily pools in order to capture enough HEX that no one individual could scoop it all up for really, really cheap and then dump it all on people's heads on Uniswap and make the difference and do this every day, because that was starting to happen. Reason number 4. At the end of the HEX adoption amplifier phase, at the end of the HEX launch phase, on day 365, on, I believe it was November 17th of 2021, there was a day called the Big Payday. Now let me explain a little history here. Stick with me, okay? The Big Payday was a day where all HEX stakers actually got bonus HEX coins distributed to them based on the unclaimed HEX from the Bitcoin free claims. See, HEX was also available during its launch phase to claim for free if you were a Bitcoin holder. Now, it turns out a lot of Bitcoin maxis didn't want to touch it. They hated on it. They were too proud to get their free money. So rather than claim it, a lot of it was left unclaimed. And a lot of this unclaimed HEX that the Bitcoin free claimers didn't claim, so there was a lot of HEX that got distributed back to the stakers, aka the true believers in the HEX system. And it all got distributed only if you were staked on that one particular day, and it was called Big Payday. Now again, here people tried to game the system, and they thought, well, all I have to do is be staked for a single day, and I get a whole bunch of bonus HEX, right? Well, that's true, but the long-term stakers got far more bonus HEX than the short-term one single day stakers that were trying to game the system. Now, what happened in reality? Everybody got free coins, but the people trying to game the system by only staking for one day, they basically thought, hey, they're just going to get their free coins, come here for a day, dump all the coins, and then get out of here and never come back. And that is bad for the long-term believers. The short-term profit takers, the short-term opportunists, were trying to take advantage of the long-term believers. So the origin address stepped in and staked a very high percentage of all the HEX in the total supply. I believe the HEX origin address staked 90% of the total supply of HEX, only leaving 10% of HEX liquid. Now previously there was 10% of HEX staked and 90% of HEX liquid. This led to the projected payouts for Big Payday being astronomically high. And what the origin address did is that by staking 90% staked and leaving only 10% liquid, he lowered the Big Payday bonus payouts in HEX, but only particularly for the shorter one-day stakers. Now, these guys still got 30% free coins. But oh man, if you were there on that day, so many people were complaining because apparently their free money wasn't free enough for them. And because they only got 30% free HEX rather than, 3,000% free HEX, they were crying and screaming scam and everything because they themselves couldn't take advantage of the system. This really happened. It was hilarious. Now, the long-term stakers were still very, very happy because people that were staked for 5 or 10 years got double, sometimes even triple their free HEX just for being staked during that one day. But because they had much longer stakes, they got much more highly rewarded. Whereas the short-term one-day stakers, the origin address made it so that they only got 30% free HEX. Now, I'll take 30% free HEX any day of the week, especially for only having to be staked one day. So really this was a win-win for everybody, but it was a way for the origin address to protect the price from these short-term stakers who basically just wanted to dump on everyone's head after one day. Now, if you look at the price chart on Big Payday, we still had a giant 85% dip, but 1 or 2 months later, we were right back up to all-time highs. We recovered very quickly over a very short time, and the dump would have been much larger in magnitude and much longer in time if the origin address hadn't acted in the favor of all the stakers during that particular time. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the origin address proved its benevolence in this particular situation. Just like in all the previous situations I mentioned, the origin address acted in a way that benefited the believers, that benefited the ecosystem as a whole, and allowed HEX to grow without others trying to detract from it. Reason number 5 has to do with a new coin that's out called Hedron. Now, Hedron is a complementary coin to HEX. If you have HEX, you can claim Hedron every single day that your HEX stake occurs. Now, in the beginning of Hedron, in the launch phase of Hedron, Hedron was distributed to HEX stakers particularly. And in the early days, if you claimed Hedron early within the first 10 days, you actually had a 10x multiplier on your Hedron bonus. So people that claimed Hedron early got a lot more Hedron than people that claimed Hedron, 100 days later. Now, of course, remember the origin address does have some stakes. It does have some very large, very long stakes, and we call these signaling stakes, signaling good faith, signaling benevolence, whatever. But the origin address also essentially got a bunch of Hedron, and the origin address became a very powerful, very big player in the Hedron ecosystem by claiming their Hedron tokens. Now, everybody was kind of watching and wondering what they would do with those Hedron tokens because the origin address had the ability to dump all that Hedron and basically send Hedron into the ground and obliterate the price for many, many months, if not years. But the origin address chose not to do that. So it's not about just the actions that the origin address has taken. It's about what the origin address hasn't done. And it's actively chose not to sell Hedron, not to sell the price of Hedron down, but rather instead to put up a giant liquidity wall on the HEX Hedron liquidity pair on Uniswap. Now this gets a bit technical, but basically what that means is that with a lot of the Hedron that the origin address free claimed in the launch phase, a liquidity wall was put up so that people that wanted to buy Hedron using their HEX could swap all their HEX into Hedron, and they did. That entire liquidity wall was eaten through in the matter of months. Now, once all this HEX was swapped for Hedron, and this liquidity wall was eaten through, it allowed the Hedron price to really thrive in US dollar terms, and what you were left with was essentially a HEX Hedron pair, liquidity pair, on Uniswap that's very, very favorable to HEX. If you go on Uniswap right now, you can see that about 50% of the liquidity, of all liquidity of Hedron, is tied to HEX. And that's not completely, but it's partially due to the origin address stepping in and helping that happen a little bit faster by, again, putting up that Hedron sell wall. So what we now have is an ecosystem where there's high liquidity in the HEX Hedron pair, which, if you know anything about liquidity, this helps the two coins go up and down together. It bonds their price action together, and it helps them pump as a single cohesive unit. So to me, that signals that the HEX origin address is actually pro-Hedron. It's actually benevolent towards Hedron, and it's helping the ecosystem grow by helping foster that liquidity environment. And finally, reason number 6. This is the single most important reason if you're right here. And again, keep watching because I'll give you some more reasons after this one. Some more smaller reasons. But reason number 6 is the single, undeniable, undisputable fact that should change your mind about the origin address. And if it doesn't, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe HEX just isn't for you, and that's totally fine. But if you look at the blockchain, the HEX origin address has never sold a single coin ever in 3 years, more than 3 years. It's never dumped a single coin. And you've got people watching these addresses like a hawk. It's hard to do, but blockchain analysis tools allow you to watch these addresses. And believe me, people are watching them. So if HEX ever does get sold, people would be shouting about it. Now, of course, the HEX origin address can sell HEX without hurting the price. It can do so in a responsible way, but it hasn't. Why not? Because why would you want to nuke your own project? Quite simply, it doesn't seem to get more logical than that. Why would any founder just want to hit the nuke button and destroy their own project for peanuts? Even if all of the HEX was sold on the open market today in the HEX liquidity pools, they'd only be able to extract maybe like $9 million or $8 million out of the entire ecosystem. Now, do you think a man with hundreds of millions of dollars really cares about dumping his coin for $8 million? No, he doesn't, and he hasn't. But guess who has? Guess which founders have objectively dumped their coins at the top of the market? Vitalik Buterin of Ethereum, Charlie Lee, the founder of Litecoin, Brian Armstrong, the founder of Coinbase, sold a bunch of his Coinbase stock. This is all proven in real history, but nobody seems to care about that. Everybody seems to give them a pass. I mean, Charlie Lee sold all of his Litecoin. Vitalik Buterin has sold the top of the last 2 cycles. He sold Ethereum at the top, millions of dollars worth of Ethereum, yet somehow nobody's outraged about this. Yet a guy who's never sold a single coin after 3 years. I mean, how much more time do you need to be safe here? Now, yes, obviously we're all taking the gamble that the origin address won't just dump all the coins and nuke the price to zero, but to me that seems like a pretty obvious gamble, given what I've just told you. And with all these other founders dumping on your head, all these other VCs dumping on your head, it's really odd to me that the HEX origin address, who's never sold a single coin, that's never done anything but beneficial actions to the HEX project, gets so much scrutiny and so much made up, fan fiction narratives about the origin address somehow being evil or nefarious. So can you think of more reasons why the origin address is good or even bad? I mean, if you think the origin address is bad, I'd love to hear a reason that actually makes sense. The origin address can protect HEX from future vampire attacks that haven't occurred yet. For example, if Hedron ever decided to go rogue or to go evil, the HEX origin address could dump all the Hedron and sell it to zero, right? The HEX origin address is there to protect the HEX ecosystem and, more importantly, to protect the price of HEX if anybody tries to attack it from outside. It's also there to increase the market cap, right? Having 90% of the coins dormant is actually very, very good for the market cap, which, if you're in this ecosystem, you should know that market cap is a vanity metric. It doesn't really matter in the long run. You can't make any money out of it, but if people are going to rank coins by market cap, why not just inflate the market cap with a bunch of dormant coins that never move, just like Bitcoin? Just like Satoshi has 1 million Bitcoin that are counted in the total supply, circulating supply of Bitcoin, but have never moved since inception. The origin address in HEX is a lot like Satoshi's wallet in Bitcoin, which, yes, does hold 1 million coins, obviously in multiple addresses, and of course could dump at any moment, but it hasn't. And long story short, people expect that to continue. Now, there's other things the origin address could do. It could be a liquidity provider of last resort. Luckily, this isn't really needed. A lot of other market participants end up being liquidity providers, and we really do have a pretty diverse liquidity provider pool in the HEX ecosystem. But there you have it, guys. The origin address, Richard Hart, somebody that's been working hard for years, not only on HEX, but now on Pulse Chain. I mean, just think about, from common sense, guys, why would anybody scam? Why would anybody try to take 3 years of hard effort just to do one big scam, right? Either this is the longest con in all of human history and the man is a total psycho sociopath, or maybe he actually means what he says, which you might know if you give him a listen. Give it a try. You might not hate him as much as you think you do, because I don't know of anybody that puts that much effort into scamming millions of people whose lives have actually been made much better. And I'm a perfect example, just like thousands more people that I know face to face that I've met in real life, whose lives have been changed and who have gained financial freedom from HEX, and who are also very, very excited about the opportunity to do that all over again in the next bull market, especially considering the launch of Pulse Chain. So keep your eyes on this, guys. You don't want to miss the upcoming projects like HEX and Pulse Chain. You want to get your seat at the table for the next bull market. Or maybe you don't, and that's totally fine. Who am I to judge? If you found this content useful and you want to collaborate on ideas or just ask me questions and get a lot of my personal one-on-one attention, consider joining my Patreon, link in description below. Or if you're brand new to crypto and you don't know what I'm talking about, if this all feels like Latin to you, consider getting my course, hexpassiveincome.com, link in description below. I'll take you from zero to hero, from knowing nothing about crypto to knowing everything about security, terminology, crypto 101, all the way to buying HEX staking ladder strategies, and you'll be a pro in the matter of a couple of hours for, if you ask me, a pretty affordable price. So if you're brand new to crypto, the course is for you. If you're experienced in crypto, consider the Patreon. Other than that, hope you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and have a great rest of your day.